Good morning. It's so awesome to start the day in this way. I already feel like we've been fed. I already feel like we're starting down 100% right path. And honestly, we could go right into our breakout sessions right now and you would not miss anything. But we're going to get started with another little bit of thought that connects so well with everything that was said, with the hard stories that were shared this morning already. I love getting to hear those and hear you express exactly what you've been through, what's challenged you, and how that affects the way that we walk in our faith and in this life. Excuse me, I am battling a little bit of these Georgia pine allergies coming back. Last night, we talked about what it looks like to see like Jesus. Well, what it looks like when we start to change our perspective and we start to look at the world in a different way, and we challenge ourselves to truly see the world differently, to view the world differently. As we wrapped last night, we landed in Matthew chapter 9, and it's this story of Matthew that we look back on, and Matthew, as Jesus is walking along, as we said last night, he sees Matthew, and he calls Matthew to follow after him. And we know where that story goes, and we know where Matthew ends up as a follower of Jesus, as an apostle of Jesus. But it starts with an invitation. It starts with Jesus noticing him, and it starts with Jesus being willing to sit at the table with him. We're going to keep coming back to that throughout this weekend about what it means to truly be at the table, to sit at the table. I love what Chris said as we wrapped last night, that this hits home with all of us, right? Because as this from this place of high and mightiness, they say, why does your teacher, why does Jesus sit with tax collectors and sinners? It's an honest and real question, but we see that as when Jesus answers that I didn't come for the healthy, I came for the sick, I didn't come for the righteous, I came for those who need me. I came and I desire mercy and not sacrifice. Go and learn what this means. He came for us. He came for the sinners. But then in this situation, too, I want you to notice is that when it comes to tax collectors and sinners, and what they're talking about here is that these are known sinners. These were people who were kind of proud and living in their sin very openly. And from a cultural standpoint, people distance themselves. I'm not talking about just like people of faith distance themselves from them, but people in general distance themselves from the people that Jesus was sitting at the table with. And so I want you to think about this morning is that something different happens when we choose to sit at the table with our enemy. Something different happens when I choose to sit at the table with my enemy. Y'all know the concept of higher ground, getting to higher ground, having higher ground. It can represent a few things. Right now I'm on higher ground than you, right? I'm up and elevated just a little bit above you. And it can represent a few things when we think about being on higher ground. Sometimes it's to get a better view. And it can be a really positive thing that we're going up, and we're going up so that I can see things more clearly. And I think that's a lot of what weekends like this can be, is that we get caught in our day-to-day, and we're doing everything, and we're in this routine of life. And we need times where we step back. And we kind of elevate ourselves to look back, and we're kind of looking into our life this weekend, right? You're looking into what your life looks like, where it is going, what you're focused on, and you're kind of stepping outside of yourself to see from a higher perspective what you look like. It can also represent security. When we think about it from a military perspective, it's this concept of being on higher ground. Because from higher ground, right now, I'm only 5'9", and so if I'm fighting against a 6'5" dude up here, it's hard, right? But if I'm right here, I've got an advantage, right? Because I'm up above them. So I'm from this position of power and of authority. It can represent, again, that power, but it can also represent, if we're not careful when it comes to our faith, and it's already talked about this morning, this moral high ground. We can come from this place where we have this moral high ground of I sit above you, or I stand above you. And this beautiful thing, and I think it's why Jesus circles back and why he did actually sit at the table and why he references it throughout Scripture, is that what happens when we sit at the table is that we're intentionally stepping down. We're intentionally stepping down to be with that person as equals. And what I want you to understand is this doesn't happen by accident. We choose to look for a seat at the table. So many times in life when we are able to do this is because we choose. We are from a position of power. You're from a position of higher ground, and you choose, I want to be with you. I want to sit at the table with you. We choose to have an empathetic heart. Empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand, share, and respond to another person's feelings with experiences by seeing the world from their perspective. Heard it said a minute ago, walk in my shoes. That's what I love about these THRV talks and how they're already starting, both from the teachers and the breakout session leaders and the students, is what they're challenging you in those moments, and I hope you're getting from it, is as you're hearing their story, you're hearing your story. You're starting to hear yourself in their stories. You're thinking about where this applies in my life, that you could be right there and sharing the exact same story because you know exactly where they're coming from. You're taking a walk in their shoes. Anybody here consider themselves a little bit of an empath? Anybody? Yeah, a few. My daughter, she got it from me. So the way I would call it is like this. My kids make fun of me because when we watch, America's Got Talent or American Idol, and they do that intentional build-up scene that's like some heart-wrenching story, my kids will all, their eyes turn, and anybody that remembers from a decade ago being here, they turn and tears are rolling down my face. Because where I've gone right then in that moment is that I've gone to that parent's shoes. I've gone and I've sat in their seat, and I've heard their story of what happened to their child, what happened to their spouse. And we hear these stories, and there's a difference when we choose to be empathetic. It doesn't just have to happen by accident or naturally. It's a choice. It's a choice to walk in their shoes. There's my favorite probably show over the last couple of years that came out was Ted Lasso. Got some Ted Lasso fans here? A few. Ted Lasso is this really powerful scene. I started rewatching it recently, and it reminded me of it as I was preparing for this message. And it's a powerful scene. If you've never seen the show, it's about a guy who is a mid-level Division II Wichita State football team doesn't exist, and he's a Wichita State football, and he took them to the D2 National Championship, and he gets hired to be a Premier League soccer coach, which we don't know much about in the South. We don't know much about the other football, and so he's brought over to be this soccer coach. And one of the things I love about the whole storyline of Ted Lasso is it's a story of humility. It's a story of a guy going over there, and he goes, I know how to coach, but I don't know how to coach this. I want to learn and I want to listen. And everything he does, if you watch the story, he wants to listen. But the one most powerful moment in the whole show to me is there's this hateful character, this spiteful former owner of the team, and he's just ugly. I mean, he is truly, genuinely ugly towards the new owner who is his ex-wife. And there's this moment where it's just gone to the next level, and Ted steps up and he manipulates the situation a little bit in a good way. But he gets him to play a round of darts. And he tells him as he does this, he kind of milks it. It's similar how we would be. He asks him, say, hey, do you know darts, Ted? He said, I know a little bit, but I'm more of a cornhole guy myself, like a lot of us will be maybe outside later. And then as he steps up and as they get to the final round, he says to him, if you would have asked, you would have known that I spent every day from 6 to 15 playing darts with my dad before he passed. And he says a statement that you probably heard shared before. He says, be curious, not judgmental. All those guys, he says, that used to belittle me, he talks about his life. All those guys who used to belittle me and thought they had everything figured out and judged me for everything. And they judged everyone. And he says this, if they were just curious, they would have asked questions. What I want you to challenge you to be when it comes to your relationships, when it comes to those hurting relationships in your life, is to be a little more curious. To be somebody who's willing to sit at the table and ask questions, to know why people are exactly where they are. Romans 12 is where we're going to spend most of our time the rest of this morning. In Romans 12, in the beginning, it's a passage that a lot of you are probably fairly familiar with. Paul challenges us to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed, discerning what is good and acceptable in the perfect will of God. Transformation is an interesting thing, and it's an interesting concept, but it's very different with what Paul's saying here in Scripture. So we think about making changes, right? We have a lot of people who have a lot of different hobbies, a lot of different activities, a lot of different things that you're passionate about in this room. And I think about it from a sports perspective. You know, when I was playing football growing up, I would want to make a change. Each off season, there were goals. There were things that I wanted to be better about. You know, I wanted to be taller than 5'9", and I couldn't change that. I wanted to do some things that I just were out of my control. But there were things I could change, and so I would focus on those things. I would focus on my diet and on my exercise and my training and what I was going to do and how I was going to get better at what my skills were. This is so different when it comes to your faith, and you just heard it. I loved what Devin said a moment ago, and if you didn't hear it now. When he said in his prayer, God, change us into good trees. He doesn't say, hey, Christians, transform yourself. Hey, what I want you to do is I want you to transform yourself. I want you to change yourself. I want you to redefine yourself. No, he says, be transformed. Allow God to work in your life. Allow God to change what the focus of your life is. Present yourself. How you do that? Present yourself as a living sacrifice. Being willing to die to your old self, die to that self-righteous self, that person who felt really confident in knowing what was right, but their fruits weren't there. I focused every day on knowing what the right things were, but I wasn't actually living out my faith. So God, what I want you to do is come into my life, and I want to present myself a living sacrifice because I want you to change me from the inside out. I want you to transform me, God. And what's he say at the end? To discern what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. What you're asking in this prayer is you're saying, God, I want you to use me. And I want you to use me exactly where you want me to be, not where I want me to be. God, change us into good trees. And he says in verse, as we keep reading throughout the passage, he says in verse 3, for by the grace given to me, I say to every one of you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think. You know, we think about this, and there's no I in team. There's no I in THRV either. You know, Caleb called that out a minute ago. Or in THRV. What we know this concept, right? Thinking of others more than I ought to think of myself, more highly. Or not thinking of myself more highly than I ought to think. You know, think about what I'm talking about with empathy. This is a big part of it. And a big part of it is knowing the grace that you've been given. For by the grace given to me, by the grace given to me. What Paul is saying here is that by the grace that I fully understand, don't think of yourself too highly. Because I did. That's what Paul's saying here. He's saying, I did. I thought of myself really highly. And maybe you've been in that seat before, and I think that's what Devin was hitting at in his message a moment ago, is I've been in that seat where I thought of myself pretty highly. Like, I'm in a really good place with God. I'm in a good relationship. I know the word really well. Hey, I can get up here and I can preach it. I can give a devotional. I can give a sermon. People look up to me. They ask me these things. We start to find this goodness in ourselves, and we start to miss the goodness in others and what God wants for all of us. So sit in a place of power. Sit in a place where we know the equality that we have with the person that we're sitting across and the grace that we receive and that they need. And in verse 9, he says, let love be genuine. Let love be genuine. In other words, what we say in our language, let love be real. And how is real love defined? Real love is defined by hating what is evil and holding tight to what is good. Hating what is evil and hold tight to what is good. I want you to think about that with the concept of love, because we talk about love a lot in our messages up here. and we should focus on it. But do you think about the opposite side of what love can mean for us when we hate what is evil? We don't hate evil people. We hate what is evil. We hate what is tearing people apart. We hate what is tearing our world apart. We don't hate the people that are in this. We hate the evil that is in the world. The evil is very sneaky. When it comes to the table, evil is extremely sneaky. Evil knows that it doesn't get a seat. Evil knows that it's not welcome at the table. And so what evil can try to do if we're not careful is evil can try to disguise itself in self-righteousness and in goodness. And then in doing that and saying, I'm the one who has it all figured out and this is my table. And that sounds like goodness, right? This is my table. I'm doing the things that are right. It can decide who's invited to the table. And that is not the choice of evil. It's the choice of our God, and he invites all of us to sit at the table. There's a story in the Old Testament that probably a lot of you are familiar with. And it's the story of Joseph. Joseph, if you're not familiar, I'll kind of summarize really quickly. Joseph was a favorite son of Jacob. Everyone loved Joseph. Just kidding, they didn't. But Jacob did. Jacob loved Joseph. He showed favoritism. Maybe you're sitting there and you're looking across the room at your brother or your sister, and you're like, yeah, I wish that was me. That was the favorite child that got that really sweet coat of many colors. Joseph was the favorite. His brothers resented him. Joseph didn't do himself any favors always at the early part of his life. But he didn't deserve what came. His brothers decided that, hey, we're going to take it, and at first, we're going to kill him. We've got him out in the field, like, hey, he is a thorn in our side, a thorn in our flesh, and let's kill him. And then Reuben has the idea, he's like, hey, let's not kill him, let's throw him in a pit. And then finally where they end up is they say, okay, we won't leave him in the pit to die this long, miserable death that we didn't kill him. We just threw him in there. And I want you to think about that, and it's a side note, but how often do we do that? How often, we don't actually just feel the burden of abandoning somebody, but what we do is we leave people in a pit. We leave them in a pit, and it says to Joseph there, he left them in a pit with no water, no food, nothing to drink. We just leave people dry and empty instead of actually going to them and being willing to save them. But they had him down in the pit, and then they decide, hey, you know what? Let's not have his blood on our hands. Let's sell him into slavery. Much better, right? We'll sell him to the Ishmaelites. And so as they sell Joseph off, Joseph goes on this crazy adventure of a life that you can take time on your own and read through in the late chapters of Genesis, starting around chapter 37. But he goes through this crazy adventure of a life where he goes from being a slave to rising to a place of prominence within that household, to falling back all the way to prison and to imminent death, and then to rising up to being Pharaoh's right hand into this place of power in the most powerful nation at the time. He has this roller coaster of a life. And when I think about Joseph as he's going through this, and some of the stories we just heard, the easy thing to do when you are hurt in that way is to just wait for the day. Man, I'm waiting for the day. I'm waiting for the day when I get my vengeance. They have taken advantage of me. They have abandoned me. They have left me for dead. They have sold me into slavery. I am waiting for the day. I don't know about y'all, but I'm a big hype guy. I love a hype speech. On the way, I coach flag football, as you can tell. I'm a dad coach now. I've kind of got that look to me. Sometimes those little short. No, I'm just kidding. But I go every weekend, and on the way to the games, my son Tripp and I, we leave a little bit early. We've got to drive to the field, and we play hype music, and we play hype speeches, and I get them worked out because I love to hype up before I'm going to go and play a game. Flip side of that, and it's something about the way I'm built, and maybe some of you relate to this, is when I'm hurt. I do like hurt hype. I go through in my head, and I think about, I'm so hurt by what happened. I'm so hurt by my friends. I'm so hurt by this situation. And I start to think, man, I'm pretty good with words usually, so I think about the words I'm going to say. When I see them, I'm going to show them. I'm going to tell them. I'm going to say this, and it is going to cut. Like I'm going to cut them to the core, and I know exactly how to get there. And I'll go through in my head, and I'll hype it up. Thankfully, the longer I hype that up, the more my heart gets convicted, the more I understand as I've matured in life what that actually leads to. And that's what we see in the life of Joseph. Joseph had this time of, I'm sure, early on, just intense hatred in his heart. I don't see how you couldn't. These moments of why me? Why did this happen to me? Like we talked about in our second message. Why did this happen to me? Why are we here? This desire for vengeance and for things just not making sense in life. And I want to make it right. And I want to get what I deserve. And his brothers, they're in the land, and there's a great famine. Joseph, blessed by God, had seen this coming and prepared Egypt, so they're now even more in a place of power. But this wasn't his intent in doing this, but it's the result. And sometimes when you're following God and you're listening, I want you to hear that it's not your intent, but it's God's intent for the end result. And God leads his brothers back to him. And they come, and again, there's this back and forth, and it's very theatrical if you read it and you read it in that way of how it happens, the interactions, the hidden treasures in their bags as they leave, and almost the false imprisonments, and Joseph maybe just toying with them a little bit, but also just seeing who they are and seeing where their hearts are right now. And Joseph in this story, if you remember, when he sees them, especially when he sees his brother Benjamin, he goes out and he just weeps. You know, instead of in this place of power where he could have had his brother back and taken out all of his other brothers, he weeps. He's overcome with emotion. But then, you know, when you're in that other seat, because the truth is, you know, sometimes it's me. I'm not always the one being hurt. You're not always the victim in the story. Sometimes you're the one that caused the pain. And with Joseph's brothers, I genuinely think as you read this, they're convicted on what they've done, but they also understand from a worldly perspective exactly what they deserve. They know that Joseph's in a place of power and Joseph can take them out at this point. And so that what they think at the end of the story is that the only reason they're still there, except for Benjamin, is because Jacob's still alive. Like, Dad's still alive, that protects us. He's not going to take us out because Joseph loves Dad. They don't think Joseph loves me. They think Joseph loves Dad. They wouldn't think Joseph loves me because look at what me did to Joseph. Like, look at what I did to Joseph. I don't deserve any of this. So when Jacob passes away, they're fearful again. All of a sudden, all of this comes rushing back, and they think, surely he's going to take his vengeance now. He didn't truly let this go, right? He didn't truly forgive. He didn't truly choose to love us in spite of everything we did to him. And Joseph, again, is heartbroken in this moment. At the end of Genesis, he says, "Do not fear. Am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me." He doesn't understand that when it comes to his pain. He doesn't write off the fact that they did something extremely wrong to him. And that's not what we're talking about this weekend. We're not talking about the fact that it happened. It happened. The pain you went through, it happened. It was very and is going to be very real. But he says, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. And to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you, for your little ones. And thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. This is backwards, right? In this moment where we're like, yeah, vengeance is mine. Instead, Joseph comforts them. He is kind to them. He loves them. Understand this. Understand in the pain that you go through, that in the same way that Joseph had this perspective, that God can mean it for good. Some of the pain that I've experienced in my life, I have no doubt standing here at 43, almost years old next week. When you get 40s, you got to do the math really quickly in your head. I have no doubt that some of the most painful moments in my life, and I want y'all to hear that with some of the things you're going through, some of the most painful moments of my life are some of the most transformational moments that God meant for the most good. Does it hurt? 100%. Does it hurt every day, every time you reflect on it? Absolutely. But does God still use it for good in your life? Absolutely. There's one other story in the Old Testament I want to hit on before we close out. That's one that I think we need to hear again from our other seats at the table. And it's from David. If you know the story of David, David was a man of God, a man after God's own heart. He became king. He was anointed king of Israel. And he was a humble king in the beginning. Maybe a little arrogant. He thought he could kill a giant. But he did, so to give him credit, he did kill the giant. So. But he went on this path of greatness when it came to his journey to being a king. But then, like a lot of us do when we're not consistent in this, David fell from where he was. David, it was a time when it says kings would go out to war, and David wasn't there. And that's probably the part of that passage that's always stuck out to me the most. If you've ever read it, on David and Bathsheba is what we're talking about. It says the time the kings would go to war, and David was at home. He had lost the focus on where he was supposed to be and who he was supposed to be, on being the king of Israel. And David makes bad decisions. He takes advantage of his power, and he has an affair with Bathsheba and gets her pregnant. And he tries to cover up for his mistakes, because that's what we do, right? We cause this great pain, we cause this great hurt. Instead of owning that in the moment, our tendency is, as much as we can, is to go, hey, I got to figure out a way to cover this up. I have to figure out a way that I can make this better. And that's what he does, and he keeps digging deeper and deeper, and he eventually ends up killing Uriah, Bathsheba's husband, so that he doesn't look bad to everyone around him. And that's just to bring us to what I want you to see this as we wrap today. That's his interaction at the end with Nathan. That as Nathan confronts him about this, and it says Nathan goes to him, and he says, coming face to face with him, he says, tells David this parable. It says there was a rich man. This rich man had herds, flocks, all the animals he could handle, all the abundance that he could handle. And there was a poor man. This poor man had one little lamb. This wasn't a lamb he was going to eat. This was like his pet. This is something he took care of, something that he loved. He was probably going to eat it someday, so I probably shouldn't say that, but when he got hungry enough. But he had this one little lamb. And Nathan says, that this neighbor, a visitor, comes, and to the wealthy man, and as was custom, when the visitor comes, you do provide a feast for them. And so he didn't want to take anything from his flock. So he's looking at his huge, abundant flock, but then he's from a position of power, and he says, but, that's mine too, right? I can have that too. I'm here, and they're there. And so he goes, and he takes the lamb of the poor man, and he has it slaughtered for the feast. And you can imagine, because when we hear that, still when I hear it, when I can put any other scenario that we could build into that today, I get mad, I get heated. And there's this super powerful moment here with Nathan David where he says to him, hey, he should be put to death. David says, he should be put to death for this. And David says, you are the man. I think we need moments like this in our life. Moments of conviction. Moments when I look in the mirror, and this is not to make you feel less than. It's absolutely opposite. It's to make sure that you feel your need for God, your need for Jesus. It's the moment where you repent and where you pray to your Father. Again, coming face to face with our own sins has two options. It either pushes us away from God, or it's something that draws us near to Him. Our sin should not drive us away in shame. It shouldn't. It should do like Jesus did when He sat around the table, and it should draw us nearer and nearer to our God. Romans 12, verse 17, he says, repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of God, in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourself, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, thus says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by doing so, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Overcome evil with good. I talked at the beginning about our seat at the table. The world changes when we take a seat at the table. Your world changes when you have a seat at the table. You change when you make a choice not only to sit at the table, but to sit in the seat of someone else, to see through their eyes, to walk in their shoes, to know what they've been through, and to want to know, and to be genuinely curious so that you can give genuine healing. My seat's changed a lot over the years. My seat in life has changed, and it's changed every time I've made a move physically in life, from Tennessee to Georgia, from Georgia back to Tennessee, from Tennessee to Texas. It's changed every time I've taken on a new title of husband. It's changed every time I took that title again of father and father and father and father. Every time it changes me. With every experience and every loss, I've been changed because my seat at the table shifts and my perspective in this world shifts, and I see things differently from the different people in my life who come in and impact it. And the more relationships you have, the more you're going to see the way God is working in this world. Every time I see at the table has changed, I see the world differently. But not only that, I see people differently. I see evil differently. I see evil as something that is ravaging and destroying people in this world. And as Paul calls us to do with real love, I hate it. I hate that evil. And more than that, in each seat, as much as I experience evil differently, I experience love differently. I experience the grace of God differently. And I make a choice, same choice that Paul is calling us to here, to instead of being overcome by evil that is in this world, instead to defeat evil. And how do I do that? We defeat evil with the goodness of our God. Let's pray.